1 week season.
Hello, friends and Inner Circle fam. Welcome to the Week 15 edition of the OWS Roster Review stream. I'm your host, StatATL. This week, we'll be reviewing more than a dozen subscriber-submitted rosters, ranging from some of their lowest of the week to some builds who finished high up in the money. With that in mind, let's hop in with a single entry build from Inner Circle member Derek. As you see, Derek started out the build with a Matt Stafford double stack with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, and he brought it back with Antonio Gibson. So I really like this construction as a way to leverage the 50% ownership on Kyren Williams, who is also a strong play, but along with CMC, the field felt like they knew exactly where all the points were going to be scored. And so I really like this way of still betting on the Rams offense, but doing it in an intelligent but different way. Roster features a mini correlation with Bijan Robinson and the Falcons D. This was a strong spot for the Falcons run game, as well as the defense facing rookie quarterback. It just didn't pan out for us this week. Roster features Rashid Shaheed as a one-off, so I don't mind that, especially with Olave ruled out. I thought it was a really sharp play. I had Shaheed on about 20% of my builds this week as well. The roster then goes to Tyler Kraft at tight end as a one-off. I really like that as well. With Christian Watson ruled out against Tampa Bay, I thought this was a really strong spot for the Packers pass catchers in a condensed offense. And so I personally made a rule to have at least one of Dobbs, Reed, Wicks, and Kraft on every build. I even mixed in some Heath in there as well. So I really liked accounting for the Packers offense here with Tyler Kraft. And the final piece of the roster is Garrett Wilson in a spot against Miami where the Jets are likely to be trailing. I don't mind this either. So overall, I think this build is fine. I know it only scored 100 points, but it certainly could have done better than that on other weeks. The only spot I would have considered was pivoting to maybe Chris Godwin instead of Wilson to correlate with Kraft, or maybe playing Durham Smythe instead of Kraft to correlate with Wilson with Tyreek Hill ruled out. But thank you for the submission this week. Next roster comes from Inner Circle member JFC. This is a $5 single entry in the 18,000 entrant contest. It is a Commanders and Rams game stack with Sam Howell in a double stack with Gibson and Logan Thomas. And JFC brought it back with Kyren Williams and Puka Nacua as well. So I don't mind this construction either. This was certainly a game I focused on heavily as well last week. The roster also features Brandon Ayuk, which I thought was really strong, accounting for the San Francisco and Arizona game. So along with the rule of one Packer on every roster, I also had rules of one Ram. So either Nacua, Kupp, Kyren, Higbee, or the Rams D on every roster, as well as one 49er, Deebo Samuel, CMC, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, and the 49ers D on every roster. So I like this one off and accounting for the 49ers. You've got Zeke Elliott at running back and Demario Douglas played together. I thought that was a unique way to play kind of two chalky pieces. It wasn't an approach that I took, as I didn't personally want to bet too heavily on a Bailey Zappi-led Patriots team. But 4x their combined salary is only 39 points. So keeping you on that 200-point pace feels doable. So I don't mind this. And then the final piece is the New York Giants D against New Orleans. Never mind, a defense with how much variance the position inherently has. So overall, build has good correlation. It accounted for the two best on-paper game environments. So overall, a good build. Thank you for the submission this week, JFC. Next roster comes from Frost 6. It is a $12 single entry in the 7,300 contest. It's a Case Keenum skinny stack with John Mechie and no bringback. So not personally a construction I considered, but I know several other contributors on OWS liked it this past week, especially with Case Keenum at the stone minimum. I would say personally, if you're going to play a punt QB like this, I prefer that you pair him with one of his primary pass catchers, especially if they're cheap, like Noah Brown and Dalton Schultz both were this week. Roster then has Breece Hall and the Jets D as a mini correlation. This was also a play that other contributors liked, but I didn't get to this past week. Jets D was popular after the Tyreek Hill news of him getting ruled out late. So I like that you got different here by including Breece Hall in that bet with the popular Jets D. The roster then has another mini correlation with Stephon Diggs and Brandon Cooks. So very contrarian way to get exposure to that game. I thought that game offered a lot of upside, and both Diggs and Cooks were both low owned, sub 5%, as you see. The last two pieces of the roster are Rashad White and Kyron Williams as one-offs. You know, both strong plays, both were part of my core running backs for this past week. And then finally, you've got Darren Waller at tight end, final one-off piece. Wasn't one that I got to personally, but I could see the logic of him falling back into his role kind of in an offense that is starved for playmakers outside of Saquon Barkley. So overall, I think the construction here is fine. I do think it's a little cute for a 7,000 entrant field with 6 pieces that are 6% owned or less. It's a solid lineup. I think this is more of a lotto field, kind of a milli maker lineup for me personally. But appreciate the submission this week, Frost 6. Next roster comes from Inner Circle member Freddie G. This is a $10 single entry with 5,000 entrants. As you see, this is a Matt Stafford double stack with Kyron Williams and Puka Nacua. And you brought it back with Johan Dotson. So I really liked this construction this week. I went back and looked, and I personally had about 5% of my total rosters in play this week were built with 2 of Kyron, Kupp, and Nacua with a commander bringback. Most of them were Stafford-led double stacks, but I really did like this build this week, Freddie. Again, we see the Bijan Robinson and Falcons D mini correlation. As we previously discussed, I liked it. Both good matchups, just didn't get there this week. I see Tyler Kraft and Deebo Samuel both as one-offs. Really like this. I liked accounting for both the 49ers and the Packers offenses. And then the final piece here is Jalen Hyatt. Jalen Hyatt at basically min salary. So I think outside of Hyatt, I may have actually had a roster built exactly like this. So I support this roster. So thank you for the submission this week, Freddie. Next roster comes from OWS member Laxachusetts. This is a $100 single entry in the small 555 entrant contest. This is a Case Keenum naked build that you brought back with Chig Okonkwo. So personally, I'm never going to play a quarterback naked that doesn't have rushing upside. So think Lamar Jackson. So I think I'd rather see you play either Mechie, Sims, or Hutchinson instead of Demario Douglas as an uncorrelated one-off at kind of the same 3K price point. You've then got CMC and Ayuk, as well as Kyron and Puka Nacua. So both, player blocks are trying to capture a large portion of the offense on both teams. Both of those game environments were fantastic for both San Francisco and the Rams. So in such a small field, I really liked this approach. And then the final piece of this roster is Jaden Reed. We already spoke about how I had a rule about one Packer on every lineup. So I really like this and accounting for the Green Bay offense. So overall, I don't mind this build for a small field contest. Thank you for the submission this week, Massachusetts. Next roster comes from Inner Circle member Berg25. It is a $12 single entry with 7,300 entrants in the contest. And as you see, this is a game over stack of Buffalo and Dallas. It's a Josh Allen double with James Cook and Dalton Kincaid. And you brought it back with Pollard and Cooks. So in general, I like game stacks. I think overall, I don't love playing two running backs from the same game, obviously, as part of that block. But I think it's more viable when they're both pass catching running backs like Cook and Tony Pollard. So I don't mind this. You've got Jaden Reed as a one-off. We spoke about this on previous builds. Really liked accounting for the Packers pass catchers against the Tampa Bay kind of pass funnel defense. So I did like that. Finally, you've got Rashee Rice and Wan'Dale Robinson. They're both fine as one-offs. I think I really would prefer that you account for at least one of the two best spots on the slate with either a Ram or a 49er. So I think I would have preferred to see you move down from the Falcons D to free up some salary to go up from Rashee Rice either to Nakua, Kyron Williams, Debo, or Brandon Ayuk. But overall, I did like the build this week, Berg. So thank you for the submission. The next roster comes from WIU, Western Illinois Agger. It is a $12 single entry with 7,300 entrants in the contest. And this is a Case Keenum double stack with both Noah Brown and John Mechie. You played CMC and Kyron together. So both were very popular, as you see, both over 40% owned in this contest, but likely seldomly played together just due to their salaries. So I really like that construction this week. You've then got Mostert and the Dolphins D as a mini correlation. I really thought that was sharp this week after the Tyreek news. And never turned down an opportunity to play an opposing D against the Jets. So I really did like this. I think personally, just a little housekeeping. I'd like to see you swap CMC and Mostert so that your latest starting player is in a flex spot. Then you've got David Njoku here as a one-off. I thought that was really sharp. He was one of my core tight ends this week. Continues to see tons of opportunities. And as I wrote about in the Tuesday Thoughts this morning, he's a guy I'm going to be high on again this week. And then your final piece here, you've got Brandon Cooks as a low-owned play to get exposure to the Cowboys and Bills game. I really like that as well. But again, I think maybe getting a little cute here, having 6 players that are 6% owned or less. So I think I'd rather see you account for the Packers instead of Brandon Cooks with either Jalen Reed or Dobbs or even Wicks here instead. But appreciate the submission this week, Berg. So the next roster comes from Inner Circle member Pete G. It's a $5 single entry with 1,900 entrants. This is a Matt Stafford skinny stack with Kyron Williams, and you brought it back with Curtis Samuel. So I really liked this start as well. Along with a chalky Kyron, you also played CMC. So as we just discussed, both very popular pieces, but seldomly played together. And same as the prior build, you also played Mostert. And just like Western Illinois University, you played him in the flex. So Inner Circle fam, let's get in the habit of being conscious of making sure our latest player is in the flex going forward. Outside of the stack, this roster has no other correlation. So as we talk about every week, it doesn't mean that a roster built this way can't win. It's just so much harder and there's more things that you have to get right. Roster has Noah Brown and Tyler Croft. We've spoken about both previously, both solid one-offs. Same with Mostert and Brandon Cooks. I would say in this particular build, maybe instead of Cooks, you consider Hollywood Brown to correlate as a bring back to your Stafford and Kyron stack. Pete, thank you for the submission this week. Next roster comes from Smills. It's a $100 single entry in the 2,200 entrant contest. This is a Sam Howell double stack with both Logan Thomas and Curtis Samuel. And you brought it back with Kyron Williams. So I don't mind this build. Generally with quarterbacks with rushing upside like Howell, I personally prefer them single stacked. A lot of times if they're putting up a strong or had to have it type score, it's coming with the benefit of a rushing touchdown or 40 to 50 yards rushing. However, I did some research on Howell and his three best games, which were week 5, week 8, and week 10. In 2 out of those 3 games, he did bring along 2 pieces with him in those games. So I don't mind this build, and Smills, appreciate you sharing this. Allowed me to do a little bit further digging for my own benefit as well. So the roster also features CMC and Aaron Jones. So I like that you accounted for both of these teams, both the 49ers and the Packers, as we've discussed. And Aaron Jones at 1% ownership was a very sneaky value with the late A.J. Dillon news. So I really liked this construction. Then you've got Noah Brown and Shaheed as one-offs, both really strong, especially with Olave ruled out. I really liked this. So overall, I did like this build. I think I would like to see just a little bit more correlation outside of the game stacks. Every other piece is a one-off. Well, thank you for the submission this week. The next roster comes from Inner Circle member G. Heller. It is a $5 single entry in the 6,000 entrant contest this week. As you see, this is a Stafford double with Kyron and Puka Nacua. No bring back. I did like that as well, although a lot of my builds did have Commanders as a bring back. Certainly not necessary. You played CMC here as well with Kyron Williams, so I liked getting to both of them on the same build. Next, you've got Reed and Shaheed, both strong one-offs, as we've previously discussed. And Njoku as well, a very solid play. Really like that. We've spoken about him before. And the last piece on this lineup is Michael Gallup. Not generally a guy I get to, but as a punt play, he's on the field a lot in a decent game environment. So I think my only feedback for this roster would be to try to get some more correlation. I'd rather see Cade Otton or Trey Palmer to correlate with Reed instead of Gallup, or a cheap giant wide receiver, Hyatt, Wandow, Slayton, etc., in a mini correlation with Shaheed. Again, it doesn't mean that a construction like this can't win. It's just so much harder and so many things that have to go your way. But appreciate the submission this week. Next roster comes from Inner Circle member 10 Inches Good. It's also a $5 single entry in that same 6,000 entrant contest. This is a Sam Howell skinny stack with Curtis Samuel, and you brought it back with Kyron Williams. Again, we've seen constructions very similar to this. I liked it. Again, another roster with CMC and Kyron together. I think the OWS community was unique in this. As you see, we have a lot of users with that submission. And as you see, they put up a combined 60 4 points, which was very strong. Roster also features Rashad White and Mean Reed in a mini correlation. So I did really like that. I had plenty of White and Jalen Reed together myself. As previously noted, I'd prefer you swap CMC and White so that CMC is in the flex as the last game. You've got Noah Brown and Chig Okonkwo here as a mini correlation. I played a ton of Brown myself. No Chig, but again, I really like that mini correlation. So overall, a really strong build. I really like all the correlation in this roster, and honestly, nothing I would change in terms of construction. So thank you for the submission this week. Final roster of the week comes from GJL Reed. It's a $10 single entry in the 380 contest. It is a Josh Allen triple stack with no bringback. Personally, I don't know that I love the triple stack here with Allen, Cook, Diggs, and Shakir, mainly just due to the salary. So to keep you on a 4x pace, to keep you on that 200-point pace, you need 107 points, which is just over 27, right at 27 points a player. So Shakir only has one career game of over 15 points. James Cook had previously never put up 27 points. And while Diggs and Allen both have multiple games over 27 points, I just think it's a tough ask for the block to get there as a whole. So I just think that was a little thin on this roster. You've got CMC here as a one-off. Again, a very strong play. I also like that you accounted for the Packers by playing Heath, as well as accounted for the Rams by rostering the LA defense. So I don't mind a double tight end in a field this size. And we spoke about how strong a play David Njoku was this week. So thank you for the submission. And finally, I guess thank you everyone for tuning in again this week. There are lots of exciting slates upcoming with the 2-gamer on Saturday, a full 9-game slate on Sunday, as well as on Christmas Day on Monday, a 3-game slate, just like Thanksgiving with staggered starts. So I will see you around the site and Discord throughout the week, and hope to see you and your OWS avatar at the top of the leaderboard at the end of week 16. Thanks again for tuning in.